Produced by Ranting Rhino Productions, Praxis Pedagogy exists to position our teaching and learning practice within different methodologies. We want to construct a guild of educators dedicated to designing a difference in our own teaching and learning and in our students' experience. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 73 of Praxis Pedagogy Podcast. I didn't just bring back one guest for this episode, I brought back two guests. That's right, Christy Boyce. You heard her on episode 42. Now, Christy has been working in healthcare in BC since around 2001. She's now working as a virtual health learning consultant. She's passionate about change management, user experience, co-design, co-creation. She did her master's degree at Royal Roads University in the MALAT program. That's the Master of Arts in Learning and Technology. And along with Christy Boyce, brought back Brandon Carson. What a great last name. Brandon Carson. You would remember him back in episode 62. Now, Brandon is a professor and learning technology specialist at Durham College. He promotes the use of open education resources and open educational practices. He also teaches at Fanshawe College, both in Ontario. He's worked at eCampus Ontario, so you know that he's going to be great. And have I mentioned that they did their master's degree at Royal Roads University, my alma mater, in learning and technology? You're going to love this episode. We go all over the place, and it's a good thing because we all tie it up at the end. Brendan does a really good job of tying it all up in the end. We all have different experiences, and isn't it great that it all comes back together? Sit back, relax, enjoy. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the episode today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the time that you invest in listening to the episodes of this podcast. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, maybe even a complaint, feel free to reach out to me through the website, praxispedagogy.com. Email me. Let me know what's going on. Would love to hear from you. Otherwise, take care. We'll see you on the other side. There we go. It's always in progress. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Praxis Pedagogy Podcast. So glad you've taken the time to listen in to this episode, a fantastic episode. We have got some returning guests with us today, and maybe we'll have a surprise guest come in a little later. We're not sure. Maybe that'll happen. Crossing my fingers. But this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whatever time you're listening to us, we have Christy Boyce and Brandon Carson. So, Christy, Brandy, say hi and tell us what you're doing right now.
Hello, good morning. I'll go first because Brandon knows I love to go first. My current role is I'm still with Fraser Health, and that's the largest health authority here in British Columbia. Really widespread of so many communities and 12 acute care hospitals. I think we're at 33,000 plus employees. And my role in the thick of COVID emerged to become the virtual health learning consultant. So kind of a role that I helped build and design and then luckily interviewed for. And they thought, hey, she's a good fit. A lot of my projects center around setting up really good system structures for healthcare providers to be able to practice virtually with their patients, whether they're just doing assessments and consultations via Zoom or via MS Teams, or whether they're teaching large patient groups, like, for example, diabetes self-management classes to 20 or so patients, because those are not skills that they had at all. So supporting them on their journey is really key. And my background was clinical. I was a critical care respiratory therapist for 18 years. So that really helps me understand where they're coming from and the struggles that they're facing.
I bet you haven't been busy in the last year and a half. Huh?
No, I'm kind of exhausted.
Going around. Yeah. Oh, mercy. Maybe we'll circle back to that and get your Kleenex. Mm-hmm. Brandon, how's it going, buddy?
It is going great. So Brandon Carson, and my full-time job at Durham College is a learning technology specialist, which has been quite busy over the pandemic with supporting faculty and how to use educational technology for their teaching and learning purposes. And the pandemic also opened up a lot of part-time opportunities for me. So at Durham College, I've been teaching part-time as well as doing course development. At Fanshawe College, I've been teaching part-time and doing course development. At Ontario Tech University, I have been involved in their EI lab out of their faculty of education, and also being a manager of e-learning development for one of the eCampus Ontario VLS funded projects. I think there was $50 million given out through eCampus Ontario for digital teaching and digital support projects.
I'm sorry, did you say 50 million? 50?
50, yeah. Big investment.
A
lot of really cool projects are going to be brought out through the next year.
No kidding. Congratulations. That's a huge investment in the system, right?
Yeah. The one project I'm working on with Ontario Tech is, it was a joint project between Trent University, Durham College, and Ontario Tech, where their 3 business deans noticed that there's not a lot of support for people coming from faculty roles into admin roles or support staff into admin roles. So it's called the Introduction to Higher Education Management. And the best way it can be explained, Michael, who's the business dean at Ontario Tech, said, imagine a chemistry professor who is an absolute genius in their field being asked to now become admin, and they have no background in that. This course should help them learn all of the main things that someone in admin would need to know working in higher education at an intro level.
Wow, that's cool. That's very cool.
That's very cool. Sounds like nursing, right? You're an expert in your field, and then voila, let's go lead the unit. Good luck.
Exactly.
I was just thinking the same thing, Christy. It's like, it's like being a plumber out in the field and then getting hired to teach in a classroom, and they give you a bunch of books and 16 little brains sitting down, and they're all looking at you. And you're like, okay, so first day, how we doing? Oh man, that's good. That's good. So, both of you are also grads of the MALAT program out at Royal Roads University. So we'll give them a shout out and tell them about their awesome program. And of course, previous podcast, you may have listened to, everybody, that the Edward Logan is signed up for the same program. And so tell us a few highlights about that program, and maybe a word of advice for Ed as he gets ready to suit up and head into the unknown of Masters Worlds.
Yeah, get ready to absorb and just grow massively. I think that was my experience. I had heard of another respiratory therapist who took the MALAT. I love how you say it, MALAT. I always say MALAT.
It's like a wine.
Same here, Christy.
It's like a wine. It's like wine. Yeah. Yeah. And she had such a great experience. It was, probably 8 years prior, but I knew, situated, having 18 years of clinical practice, I wanted to move into corporate, and I knew that technology was going to be on the forefront. And I just loved teaching from the moment I graduated, whatever role I was in. It seemed like a good fit, and I just was thrilled. I got there. Brandon and I did the residency component. We did that track. And so I remember there's only 7 of us. We called ourselves the Lucky 7. And we would later blend in with another, 20 plus people, right, in the full cohort. But I remember sitting there going, I am the only person here in healthcare. What am I doing here?
Yeah. The
first day. And how is this going to be relevant to me? Because everyone seemed to have either post-secondary or some sort of education-based background. And I just, settled in and listened, and it was incredible. Like, the learning that I could apply from other people's contexts into my own was just phenomenal. The instructors, the faculty, the program lead, Elizabeth Child, is just incredible, and such a wonderful guide to the learning. So, I think I just shot out of there and rocketed and just started spewing content at people and, ideas, and just applying it in practice immediately, luckily, in my role. Grateful, massively incredible experience for me. Can't wait to go back, actually.
Brandon, you got to love the way nurses use language, right? We just shot out of there and started spewing all over the place. You're like, oh, mercy.
Totally.
Okay.
It's a visual for you, Tim.
Yeah, exactly.
I can say, with doing group work with Christy, her writing, she does not talk like that at all. Very professional in the writing. If I was to give any advice to Ed, it's just enjoy every step of the journey. The one thing I found with Royal Roads is they have so many support systems in place. So I remember listening to the podcast from Ed yesterday, and that was one of the things he did mention, that he's coming in a unique situation. That's one of the things that Royal Roads offers. You don't have to go your traditional ladder of getting a diploma and then getting a degree and then working into your master's. Royal Roads looks at your life experience. And that was the one thing I loved about Royal Roads is they had all those supports in place. So if you may not be the best person at writing a paper, they have a writing room available where they'll support you with your writing and teach you to become a better writer. If you can't go to live sessions or be on campus, there's a lot of resources on their website that can also support you. And same within the program, the faculty team, your peers, it's just such a neat experience to be able to learn with everybody. So I learned more, I think, from my peers than I necessarily did from the faculty there, just because we had so many people in so many different contexts working in teaching and learning centers, healthcare, you name it, military background. So it was really neat just to get all those different contexts and see how you can apply them to what you're doing in your work as well. One other part I found so interesting about being at Royal Roads, just to show how good the MALAT program is, I was the cohort rep for the program, and there wasn't a lot of comments from students of things that they wanted to see changed in the program throughout each semester. It was really like students were happy. They loved the program. They loved the faculty in it. So Ed's about to hit on a great 2-year journey here come next April.
That's great. That's great. What was your first day like? Like when you first logged in and first saw everybody's face virtually, like what was that like for you both?
We did residency. So the first time we connected and saw people, it was in person in this beautiful boardroom. You're looking at the beautiful castle that you see in X-Men. I was able to tell my kids, they liked watching the movie The Descendants, and that same castle is there. So to be able to say, oh, I was at that castle, I got some big brownie points with the kids at that point.
Nice.
I was in a unique situation where we just had I don't want to get this wrong. This was a third child. So we had our third child maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks before I flew out to BC. So my wife was being left with 2 kids and a baby at that point.
Oh,
yeah. So it was interesting, but it was awesome walking into the boardroom. You're seeing all these people, you're connecting with them. Christy scared me a little bit at first, but we became best friends afterwards.
Brandon showed up in like a full suit. I think the first day, was that the first day that you were in like you were just dressed up every day. He was in a full suit. So I was always scared by Brandon until we got to know each other.
Nice. Chrissy, what was your first day like?
Yeah, it was, I actually went to UVic for a year way back, way back in the 90s. And so it was nice to come back over to the island to go to school. And again, residency, beautiful campus, just gorgeous ocean, Hatley Castle. The view was great, but super nervous, right? I actually, as a respiratory therapist, it's a diploma program. So I actually didn't do my bachelor's until probably about 14 years after I began practicing and finished my diploma as a respiratory therapist. So I just didn't see the need. I was learning so much on the job. I had a year of working as an anesthesiology assistant at BC Children's Hospital. And that was all at that time, no extra certification. It was just practice, like, on the job training. And I was moving around into different positions as, supervisory education. I didn't really see a need to go back and do it. And I thought, these courses in my bachelor's are going to be, just get through them. They're not going to be helpful content. So I had only just completed an online bachelor's in allied health sciences, probably about 2 years prior. Right. So for me, being an adult learner and in this space where I'm doing my master's, I was a bit overwhelmed and thought, oh my God, can I do this? But incredible staff, great welcome. And like Brandon said, a lot of great resources. Like we were offered executive coaching for, how to work together as a team through the process, through that 2 weeks as well. So that when we worked as small groups, when we paired off into small groups, we had some skills to lean on, how to problem solve and work together and collaborate. And then they would continue to ask, how did that go? Did anything come up? And things did, right? Mm-hmm. Little rubs as an adult. You've got lots of history. You've got lots of stuff in your background that can really affect how you work with other people, and a bit of ego there that you're working around. And so that was incredibly helpful to have the coaching.
Spacebar twice versus once after a period.
We always disagreed on something.
That's amazing. Oh yeah. I remember my first day walking in there, because like in our program, I think we did a month of online stuff, and you're interacting and off and on, off you go, and everyone's got their pictures and stuff. And then you actually go to residency and yeah, you walk in there. And how big was your cohort?
Our residency group was 7, very tiny.
7?
Yeah. And then we blended in to the rest of the cohort. I think there was 20, I want to say like 23 others that we blended into.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our cohort was 53. Yeah.
Wow.
It was insane. It was insane. And like you, Christy, I think there was one other tradesperson in the room with me. And so I'm looking around going, okay, going to be flying solo for a long time here, I think. Right. And so it was funny because it's almost like our spider sense was tingling because he was on the other side of the room. And it was like we saw each other, and he kind of made a beeline for the center of the room. So did I. We're like, okay, so what's your background? And we're like, okay, are we the only 2 here? So, yeah, but it was good. It was really good, really good. And then, so you go through the 2 years, you graduate. Obviously it's made an impact in your life, not just professionally, but personally. Cause I mean, they have that awesome tagline is it's life changing. Right. And, yeah.
It was. Yeah. It's funny. I'm listening to you. I've been sort of entrenched in teaching people how to build social presence. And so I'm listening to you describe these in-person experiences, and I'm thinking, okay, how do I parallel that to an online meeting? How do we do that in Zoom? How do we create those small groups where you can find the other person in trades and, those connection activities that you do in the beginning? Sorry. So there's a little tangent there, but it's funny how, like, who's meeting in person right now? We're slowly transitioning at Fraser Health for the corporate groups to go, okay, 1 day a week, we're going to start with 1 day a week back in office. And it's going to be really weird. It already is weird because no one's there. It's empty. It's like this massive empty space. And so building those online connection activities is kind of key right now for me, teaching people how to do that as facilitators.
It's interesting you say that because I went downtown Vancouver to the downtown office for the first time in a year and a half. I took transit, and I'm like one of 3-4 people in the bus on this major portion of the leg, get on the SkyTrain, and it's almost empty. And where it would normally be packed, right? It'd just be standing room only. Get downtown. It's like a ghost town. There's like and I mean, it's summer too, right? So you're thinking, okay, then summer people are away. Get into the office. I'm the only one in the office. And it's like, I felt like I was in the movie Legend, right? Yeah. Where it's just, I kept expecting something around the corner. And yeah, it was insane. It was insane. Brandon, have you felt that same thing too? People coming back to school and seeing each other for probably the first time in over a year?
So I had my first day 2 days ago. Tuesday was my first day back in the office, and we're an e-learning team of 6. So what we're doing is it's 2 in the office at a time. One thing that kind of caught me off guard was I didn't see any faculty all day. We have to wear masks the whole time. So doing support calls while wearing a mask, I found that our job, we've shown that we can do it remotely and do it remotely extremely well. Versus being in person. When you're in person, you get those phone calls. I can't see the screen to support the faculty member, where when we're doing it remotely and we're always using Teams and screen sharing, I just found that the level of support has improved in quality as well in quantity, because I'm finding our part-time faculty who normally didn't have time to come and see us before are finding time at work to come and do a Teams call with us and getting the support they need with their teaching. So being on campus was weird. I'm hoping that eventually it keeps getting better and better. But first experience back was definitely odd, very quiet, didn't see a lot of people. And I've enjoyed working from home. I've really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Who hasn't enjoyed working from home? I love the commute, especially night school, right? Like you just finish your supper and my 30-second commute to my office and sit down and get going. And then my commute home, my class was face-to-face was a 3-hour class, right? And so by the time you throw in commutes, that's a 5-hour commitment, right?
Wow. So an hour each way for you.
Well, 40 minutes. And then by the time you park and get in and, and settle, that's an hour, right? And
I'm lucky. I'm a 9-minute walk across the street, like so door to seat, like 9 minutes tops. And when I'm teaching, it's usually like 5 minutes. Like I can see the college from my living room.
Yeah. That's great.
I think that's been, the biggest for us in healthcare. We're always looking at what are the benefits of virtual, because there's some downsides, right?
Sure.
You can't do a hands-on assessment. So you have to really judge, who can we do this with and who can we not? And at what point in the care journey do we really need to flip to see them, right? You don't want people in a renal outpatient clinic getting to the point that next week they're having a transplant and you haven't actually put your hands on them or actually met them in person. That's a problem, right? And, we are finding some clinics in that position where, we were doing virtual for so long that we realized, oh my gosh, this person's at a point in their care journey where you really should have seen them in person by now.
Wow.
But yeah, it's a good point that one of the biggest benefits for us, of course, is the patients not wanting to pay for parking and travel, right? Yeah. Like 2 or 3 hours of travel is not a huge deal if it's just yourself, but if it's winter, if you're in your 70s or 80s and driving in the winter is scary, if you have a child who is on oxygen, driving 3 hours is a big deal. Like, do I have enough power for my concentrator? Do I have enough tanks? It's so if you can do a visit, that travel piece has actually been really key for demonstrating the benefits. And we do constantly have to highlight those for clinicians who are less on the pro-adoption side. I would say on the whole, the patients are more receptive of virtual care than our providers, because so much has changed for them that they don't feel in control of. Yeah. And then in the middle of a pandemic, being asked to suddenly have Zoom skills, right, is challenging. Just like in education, of course, transitioning your teaching online.
Guy throws a camera up in the classroom and just expects his students to stay online for 6 hours as he's just going and going and going. And I'm not sure that's going to work. And
and it's true. People don't always think that way. I'm working. One of my key projects right now is with a diabetes self-management class. So this is a patient class. It's usually taught in person, 3 hours long. And then they urgently transitioned to telephone calls. And then they decided, well, we're going to take those 3-hour classes and just move the content to Zoom. So when I came in to assess and have a look at what they were doing, they were content delivery for 3 straight hours with, I don't even know if they were taking a break. I think they might have been taking a break, but the one I was asked to assess, I think one of the patients left, got his child from school, came back, continued it. Oh gosh. Okay. So we restructured the learning objectives. We revamped all of the activities so that they were, more like annotation and discussion and breakout rooms. And we've shortened them into 1.5 hour classes and 5 of them instead of 3 3-hour classes. So we've adjusted that content, but so many new skills involved in that and such a learning curve. So we're going to try piloting that at 2 hospitals and then potentially scale that out to the other 8. So we'll see how it goes. But that's kind of what we're finding everybody needs help with. We have about 300 outpatient clinics, and I'm just working with sort of the one diabetes cohort right now. So we've still got renal and neuro and cardiac, and one of me as the learning designer and, the person project managing. And so one of me helping them. So it's taken us almost a year to do that one piece. So really interesting.
This doesn't sound too far off from a university though, does it, Brandon? One learning specialist for, 50 people or 100 people.
Yeah, exactly.
So Brandon, how has your degree helped you in your online teaching and education?
Not even just as much the degree, but also the learning experience of seeing how our faculty has taught us really impacted how my approach to being an online faculty member, whether it be what I took at Ontario Tech or Royal Roads or even Athabasca afterwards, seeing all the different approaches those faculty members used when teaching us, whether it be asynchronously, synchronously, or a mix of both. Seeing all those approaches really helped shape me as an online professor. The going to Royal Roads though, and finishing with the MALAT program, having that sheet of paper also opened up so many doors when it came to applying to positions, because a lot are looking for you to have a master's level education when it comes to teaching,
right,
or managing. So I'd say that was one of the biggest aspects of doing this. The learning was amazing, but also the amount of doors that just opened up by showing I am a MALAT graduate at several different institutions. And then building community as well has been absolutely fantastic. So through doing the Master of Arts in Learning and Technology, I was able to meet David Porter, for example, at that during our residency. And hearing a little bit more about eCampus Ontario. I'd already heard a little before, but hearing even more about it had me excited to see, is there a possibility to ever work there in the future? And from hearing about eCampus Ontario there, a job opportunity opened up in the future that I applied for, and I was able to work there for over a year. Yeah, and you know how great of a feeling it is to work at a provincial level, the impact that you can make. You're doing that over at BC campus, and it was amazing to do that in the Ontario higher ed system as well.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it was so good I stayed. It's like that guy who with the razor company, right? I love the company so much I bought it. No, for sure. Hey, Brandon, as we're transitioning into this next phase of education, and some are going back to face-to-face, some are staying online, some are doing blended. Where do you find yourself settling into and really getting excited about?
I love hybrid. I love getting the in-person aspect to do a lot more of the doing. And then the more theory-based approach happening in the online environment. High flex or flexible delivery isn't something that I can get behind yet. I want to see more data about it. To me, in my mind, I just think it's going to be a watered down approach to education, because I don't see how you can give both audiences, those who are online at the same time as you're trying to teach these students in person. I don't see how they can get the true attention that they deserve as students. But with my delivery, I've been teaching hybrid even before the pandemic started with a flipped classroom approach. So they learn the theory before attending class. We review a couple of the high level topics, the important aspects of what was in the online material. And then we start doing more of the doing, because I teach a lot of computer applications, web development.
Right.
And I found that was really interesting to try and teach online, because normally in person, it works quite well, where I have a large screen at the front. The students can watch what I'm doing. I can go at a slower pace so that they can keep up and follow along. But if you do that online and the students don't have two monitors, it is really hard to do. So I did a lot of my learning asynchronously for online over the last year.
Okay.
At first, a lot of students have been hesitant. Week one, I'm really big on co-creating the learning space. So it's just not me saying, hey, this is how the rest of the semester is going to go. I like to do that with the students. And I let them know that in the past, this asynchronous approach has worked quite well when learning web development, learning these specific computer applications. They're a little hesitant at the beginning, but by week 3, they're like, yes, this is definitely the way we should be learning this material. Right. And I based it on how I learned some of this new material. So as changes happen in web development or with different computer applications, I use tools like LinkedIn Learning to learn this. So seeing the approach that they take in those with bite-sized learning videos followed by short assessments. I've taken the same type of approach in my online learning as a faculty member.
What's the student feedback on that? Been good? Very good. Yes. They like the flexibility. So they enjoy being able, if they can't make the class, they can go back, watch a lot of these videos. And then for the in-class portion, it's usually more me, again, highlighting those high-level things I really want to make sure that they take home, and then answering any questions that they may have. So during the pandemic, that's what the online portion's really been about. Going over key concepts and demoing anything they have questions about. But a lot of that same material is already available in the weekly lessons that have been created. And then when we have our sessions, when we have our Zoom meetings, I set it up so the first section of class, the recording is not turned on, so they can feel comfortable to ask any questions that they want to off recording. We do our session, which is recorded, and then it ends with another non-recorded session, so that if they again have any questions that they want to ask, they're able to do so. And then of course that recording is available to them when you're done, right? So then you upload it to the LMS and they have access to it throughout the whole course period. Exactly. And one thing I love about Fanshawe with doing my teaching there is they've actually made it so their Zoom their Zoom recordings, there doesn't seem to be an expiry date on them. In some cases, institutions are putting like a 2-week expiry date on videos. Or with Fanshawe, those videos that are recorded to the cloud are still available from the fall 2020 semester. So they've invested in their IT architecture to really be able to support both the faculty members and the students. How does faculty feel about that those lessons are still online and essentially canned for however long they're accessible for?
The faculty are able to go in and remove videos if they wanted to. So they're able to go in and take anything down that they want. They can choose how long they want it to be available for.
It's interesting because I know there's been some pushback here in BC, especially in the trades, that people have felt like, if I can my lesson and put it online, then, and it's going to be there forever, then eventually that's going to take my job. And I think that's a short-sighted, narrow view of the whole system. However, I think there's some truth to that in the sense that once we've captured it, as long as the content doesn't change, yeah, it's there forever and you never have to do it again, essentially. So there is some truth to that. It's interesting. Before I come to you, Christy, I just want to ask one more question about Brandon, about the HyFlex, because HyFlex is it's that shiny spoon in the drawer right now, right? And we're coming off this thing that we've been going through, and people have found out that they can really teach online really well. Surprise, surprise. So tell me a little bit more, Brandon, about the HyFlex, and what do you mean by the data? Because what is it about the dual audience that you're not quite sure about?
I'm just not sure how you can support both audiences at the exact same time. If you have students who are in an online setting asking you questions, but you have 7 hands up in the physical classroom and you're having to go around to talk to them, are you able to do that well? If questions are being asked in person, if those that are online, are they able to hear the questions? So I really think you have to have a room set up very well to do this properly. You need the type of person who's able to manage the technology and the in-person support at the same time. In some cases, it's just the faculty member. Don't get me wrong, some institutions are providing additional support. So there's like an assistant in the classroom helping. But if it's just one faculty member trying to manage all this at once, I just don't see how the students can get the same level of support that they'd be able to receive if it was a single delivery method of being online or face-to-face. One thing I really like about Fanshaw's approach is, rather than doing things using HyFlex, what they've ended up doing is, in their business program anyways, they have it so the student can select the delivery method they'd like. So you either are going to be an online student or you are going to be an in-person student. Or with a HyFlex option, it can change week to week. A student can choose to stay home one week, go in the next. So again, I want to see research on this to show how well it actually works. And that's one thing that I haven't had the opportunity to read in detail yet. I want to know, is the student experience going to be as enjoyable in this case? Are they going to be able to learn as well in this type of environment? Because from a faculty perspective, I just feel like you're being pulled everywhere, trying to be everything at once. And when you're being pulled all those ways, I feel like the learning is going to be diluted at that point. I could be very wrong, but that's just my initial thought on it.
Yeah,
and what is your thought, Tim?
Yeah, those are good points. And as you're laying that out there, I'm thinking to myself, so is it more of a facilitation issue than a delivery issue? Because, and I'm just thinking of contexts where I've had, 60 students in a room, right? Where I've been in a lecture theater, and there's a different dynamic and a different facilitation technique that I use than when I'm in a classroom of 16. It's just different. And I wonder too about the question of students falling through the cracks again, right? With large classes as opposed to smaller classes, the personal touch versus, the digital touch. So I'm a little unsure, but I'm kind of excited about the HyFlex option, primarily from a flexibility issue, right? And so one thing that I've learned in my experience teaching through this situation has been, students really love the flexibility, and I need to let go of control, right? And so having if I had a class of 32 students and 16 chose to come online and interact online with me during the class period, that's great. Knowing that the rest that didn't have access to the recording. Now, what they miss is that interaction that happens. What they miss is the question and answer period. Because like you, I would put a Q&A at the beginning, at the end, unrecorded, unscripted. and that was good. Yeah. So for me, I'm excited about the blending of the two technologies, just for the flexibility piece of it. And I think you're right. There's going to be a big draw on your brain when you're doing it, because you're having to flip from a screen now to actual people in a room back to a screen, and just facilitating the tech. I think setting it up is going to be just a nightmare too at first, right? Where you got to have multiple cameras, and whether you have a smart board or whatever, you're just going to have all these things floating around. But one thing I have learned is we're pretty adaptive. So it may feel like I've been thrown into the deep end of the pool at first, and got a lot of stuff to learn. I think we can adapt to it, but I'm not sure. And I think this goes to what you're saying, not sure what the end product's going to do, or what the end product's going to look like, pardon me. Because we have been hearing statements from industry in regards to apprentices going through their technical training in the quote unquote COVID era. And I'll be very careful how I say this. There's a little bit of, fear is probably too strong of a word, but there's some concern that apprentices going through technical training in the COVID era aren't getting the same level of training that they would have before the COVID era. And I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate. I'm not sure if that's a fair perspective, because there's just too many variables there. Because quite honestly, I've had students in my classroom, and it didn't matter if it was online or face-to-face, right? They're just, you're not going to make it, buddy. Right. And so let's figure something else out as to what we can do to help you. But, so I'm really excited about what it can do and the flexibility, but like you, I'm curious to know what the end product's going to look like.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to be taking this approach, you have to invest in it. You have to provide the supports that are required. So if you're not giving faculty teaching assistants, as an example, or IT support during these sessions to support them, I don't think that you've invested the people power needed to make a good product in the end. If it's just one faculty member trying to manage all this at once, I think it's going to be difficult. I don't think you're going to get a great end product. But if you invest in having all those supports available, I think that HighFlex definitely could work. Additionally, thinking it through, how are you going to invest in that? Because institutions are already very hard up for money right now, as we've seen during this pandemic. So they're not going to have the dollars to invest in hiring all these additional resources to support faculty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear so many parallels to the same in healthcare, right? We had early days of COVID, we had a couple of programs just like fly ahead, like they were waiting at the wall for privacy and security barriers to come down, and they just jumped right over as soon as it lowered a foot, right? And, for example, our cardiac rehabilitation classes, that group, actually at my local hospital, Peace Arch Hospital, they took it upon themselves to, demand new equipment, because they said, I need to see my patient, but I need to see them really big, right? Like I need to see if they're pale, diaphoretic. I need to see if they're not looking well when they're exercising, because they're cardiac patients. So they trialed and have now like a 77-inch roving monitor that actually is a smart board. Like you can draw on it too. It acts as a whiteboard, and they pushed and ran ahead, beyond their job descriptions, beyond what anyone would ever ask of them. And they're making it work. But you'll find these pockets of people who want to innovate and do things differently, and they find the supports within themselves, right? Like they'll get a buddy system going, like a co-facilitator. And then once they get those skills built into the facilitator, they're ready to go, and they can branch off from each other and say, oh, you don't need me anymore. You're good. But yeah, a lot of parallels. And I think, Brandon, you spoke to something about earlier about making sure that your students were, feeling safe and had all their questions answered in that first session, right? Like you're not recording. And for us, that's really important when I teach our healthcare providers, because we're healthcare providers. Like our job is to know the answers, assess, diagnose, treat, and don't get it wrong. So there's a lot of unwillingness to be judged and be wrong when you voice things. So for me, in all of my learning sessions, I have to be very concise about setting clear expectations and setting a psychologically safe learning environment, and saying, this is the space here. to play with the ideas, to make mistakes. If you want to co-facilitate with each other, test it out. And then, or, use your Fraser Health Zoom account to have a meeting with your family across Canada and, show them a movie, do exactly what you would do with your patients so that you can fail in that safe space. And then come back and work on it with patients. So yeah, I hear a lot of similar themes for sure. And what's emerged for me just naturally is my clinicians really have wanted me as live support. Here's some resources. Go read, go do an e-learning module, call me back and I'll do like a focused staff session for you live again. We can ask, get into Zoom, play in Zoom, ask questions. And then there's some more resources in reading. It's like this synchronous, asynchronous, bi-chronous model that's really naturally emerged just out of what I thought they needed and what they're responding well to. It's interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, Christy, because our doctor has 3 levels of interaction with us. So one is by phone, just do a phone thing. The other one is through video. So she'll actually Zoom with us. And then the third one is in person. So you got to make you got to make an appointment and come back in. Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting on different levels with our kids and even my wife and I, how those have integrated into our life. And now it's just normal, right? It's like no longer do we have to pack somebody up and go into Coquitlam where our doctor is, right? Yeah. We can set up an appointment and it's like being in the office where, the appointment's at 10:30, she'll call it 10:40, 10:45, right? And we appreciate that about her because she's the same with us. She takes her time. She's methodical. It doesn't matter if it's phone or in face-to-face. She always goes through the same deal. And she's great. We love her. And she's actually new because she took over from our previous doctor who retired. And yeah, it's almost like it's the same person, but they're different. And so it's been really nice that way, but it's been a 3-tiered approach.
Yeah.
And I think of our educational processes and going, even before there was a 3 or 4, even 4-tiered approach where it was just different levels of interaction with students in the class. Right. And have you seen this situation become, like I've always described it, like a magnifying glass for us, that it's really magnified issues and situations?
Yeah, I think so. We do find that the default became telephone, right? And when we're doing our data capture on virtual care in our health authority, telephone is included. So, if we're 90% telephone and 2% video, that's still counted as a high number success. But, for me, I think it will emerge like that example I gave earlier about renal, not seeing your patient, not having eyes on them for an extended period of time, and then not seeing them in person for the entire journey. That's an issue. So I think that our clinicians are largely still in that messy space of who do I see, how and when, and what's my inclusion and exclusion criteria. And it's different for every type of care provision, right? Like it's different for each profession. Like if you're working in rehab, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, that's so hands-on. They really were struggling and still are struggling with virtual care in the health authority space because their patients are fairly acute. They're so used to hands-on. They needed specialty equipment. And so, they need cameras that, not just a laptop with an integrated camera. They need cameras that they can move around and change the angle so that they can demonstrate movements. They needed, applications that would share educational videos and they could set out learning plans and, message back and forth with their patients. We don't have approval for any of those yet. So yeah, it's really brought to the surface some issues. And I love that. If there were more of us on our team, we were 3 before COVID and we're, I think, about 14 or 15 of us now in the virtual health team for Fraser, which is great. Yeah. But if there were more of us, we would be able to do, and that's on the more clinical side. On the health informatics and IT side, there's probably an equal number. But we would be able to do discovery and a deeper dive into really looking at their patients' experiences of the care journey. And this is parallel to students, I think, in the education world. Like, what are you experiencing? What do you need? And how can we redesign this? Like, let's just blow it up and redesign it because it wasn't working in person. We weren't doing it well then. So why don't we, while we're doing the care version 2.0, refresh everything and look at the patient's journey, their experience. We bring in patient partners a lot now. So I have 2 patient partners redesigning the diabetes self-management classes with me. It's phenomenal to hear a patient who went through the in-person classes and he's saying, listen, Christy, I can't sit there for 3 hours. I'm not listening to you, right? I'm off getting a coffee. I'm turning my camera off. It's like, I'll give you 90 minutes and I'm out. Right. And that's from a lovely, engaged patient who has done the in-person classes 4 times. He came back like 4 times. So that perspective is wonderful. And one of our patient partners is she's on that context where she actually does support calls for self-management BC. So she coaches patients on how to manage their diabetes on the telephone. Yeah. And she's like, your patients are coming and they don't know what they're doing. They don't have these skills. We knew that there was foundational skills that weren't actually being developed in the in-person classes, in the way they moved on to Zoom. So we had serious work to do in the learning. So that's what we focused on, is like, what are your learning objectives here? And how are we getting to that in a really constructive way versus just, beating content into people, right? Having focused discussions with peers and reflecting on each of our contexts and problem solving on a daily life basis for healthy eating habits and healthy exercise habits. That's how we've tried to rebuild that class. Sorry, that was a ramble.
Oh, it's good.
Interesting one.
I love it.
Yeah, it's interesting in that context.
I'm always, I shouldn't be, but I'm always surprised, pleasantly surprised, a little shocked at just how closely the parallels are in with the common denominator being education, but of trades, nursing and the whole vocation there. And even Brandon, just straight up web tech courses and web design and computer science courses, right? Like there just seems to be this commonality of not only faculty, but of students.
I find change management is a big issue for us, right? Like we can plan whatever we want, but when it comes, particularly right now, global pandemic, wave 4, our healthcare providers are fried. So, me coming in going, okay, let's look at your program and how it's developed, delivering virtual care. Everyone's just looking at me like, oh God, is she crazy? Right. So I can go in and I can teach, but what's the change management, right? What's the messaging? How do we reinforce if it is done? And what value am I bringing to them? Like why, right? I have to come with a really strong why. And often that's the only good anchor of why I have is the patient experience from survey data that we have. So, what are they loving about this? You need to sort of work through that, put yourself in their shoes and offer it at bare minimum to those that have to travel a great distance. That this, like new moms with 3 little kids in tow, do they really want to come in for a visit? No, they want to do virtual. They love virtual. So, looking at that patient lens and finding, the why and the value there and knowing long-term that this isn't going away. I had a learning session, a live Zoom training session yesterday, and a lovely dietitian who said, okay, so I'm finally here. It's been like 18 months and I finally come to one of your Zoom training sessions because I thought this was just going to go away. And it wouldn't have to learn this stuff, but now it looks like it's really not. Is this going away, Christy? Like, do I really need to learn this? I know. And I said, well, no, yeah, it's here to stay. I'm sorry. Most programs are doing a hybrid model. So it was really cute. She's like, this isn't going away, is it? Yeah.
Well, it only takes 2-3 weeks to flatten the curve and we'll be back to normal, right? So. Oh, mercy. Yeah. Good deal. So I have one question for you both, and Brandon, maybe I'll start with you. How are you finding the accessibility issue for students in what you do and how you teach?
I find it's improved. So I'm blessed where I have a background from an accessibility standpoint and how to create accessible courses. So from my background in web development and through my learning, I've learned how to create accessible courses, which is wonderful. So from my standpoint, I found it quite easy. It has made it so that a lot more students are able to access the learning material. Again, if there's a reason you can't get to class due to personal reasons, family commitments, job commitments, I found that it's really opened the doors from an accessibility standpoint there. providing the material in multiple different formats, taking a UDL approach with everything we create. It has worked great. I'm trying to think, I haven't run into an issue yet with a student who's run into any problems due to their location and poor internet connection. I haven't ran into any of those problems. I've read about them, and it's interesting to see some of the different approaches that institutions have taken to resolve those problems. I spoke with folks at an Indigenous reserve here in Ontario, and they talked about how they purchased all of their students hotspots. And I was like, yeah, they invested in that for all their students. This was in K to 12 with the person I was speaking with. And I was like, that is such a unique approach to support your students. And with going online, there's no other thing we could do. So this is what we ended up doing. Bought them all Chromebooks as well for those that didn't have digital devices to use. So I think as long as you invest in making this work, it can really easily work out in the end for students. And again, from an accessibility standpoint, making it so they can access this learning material at any point is so beneficial. My role is supporting the learning management system at Durham College. And to see the amount of courses now that are fully filled with each week's learning material between PowerPoints, recorded videos. Really, if a student isn't able to attend a session, they're able to get all that learning material there. But don't get me wrong, it's not going to work for every single course. Trades is a perfect example. In Christy, your field as well in the health area is another perfect example where there are going to be those in-person aspects that need to be completed. I could learn how to insert a pipe by watching a video, but you know what, Tim, when I go to actually do it at my house, I'm not really good in that area. I can admit that. So if I tried to do that just from watching a video, chances are I'm not going to do something correctly and something really bad is going to happen, where you really need that in-person approach to make sure the person is doing it correctly. That's the only part that I find that the accessibility hasn't found a solution for. We've talked about using other technologies like AR and VR, but again, you're still not getting that physical touch that I think is so required within some of the programs that are offered in higher education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we haven't really even had a chance to dive into, in the MALAT program, we did one of our projects was surrounding virtual reality, and I loved the concept of using it for, provider empathy development and hands-on learning, cognitive learning. But we haven't had a chance to dive into that. For accessibility for me, I rub up on this every day. It's a barrier. So let me split it into two, if that's okay. Patients, really broad spectrum, depending on the demographic, depending on the area. So you might find that out in the Fraser Valley, like more Eastern, less access to Wi-Fi, less access to devices. We've had programs come to us to try and hook up, I've got 250 cell phones free, purchased. I need to give them out to mental health and substance use patients. And they just can't seem to find the fit in the process. And we try to help them, enable their clients by just handing those, similar to you, Brandon, like investing in Wi-Fi hotspots, handing out cell phones to patients that just don't have them, and then giving them data plans. But really a broad spectrum with patients. Digital literacy is definitely a barrier. But when I came into this new role, I was very strong on, we need a strong public communication plan here. And I don't think I ever got it. We need to have patients know that virtual care is good care, that, it's not substandard care. And many people still think that, right? Well, that's not good enough. In person is better. It's not always better. It can be better, but I would say I haven't really got strong support from communications to get that, to our local communities. I would love to still see that type of communication and leveraging, community access points to computer training, right? Use your local library, any programs that you can to get the basic computer skills that you need. On the provider side, kind of similar. If you've been a nurse who's paper charting for 35 years and you don't have a really good handle on computer skills, we are rubbing up against it there too. So, I was in a training session and someone asked me what I meant by right click. And I went, okay, take it back a notch, Christy. Right. So
how quiet did the room go when that came out? I was like,
right.
What?
And that's okay, because I mean, it's all spectrums and these are our employees. So we have to start somewhere. So Brandon sort of knows this. I've really been pushing from the virtual health team for our informatics and our IT side to work with me. And we're kind of collaborating with a couple of key projects who also rub up against this, bringing in computer charting. For us, it was called Integrated Plan of Care in Fraser Health. But she was having the same issues for the last 5 years with her project, like dialing it back. Never mind computer charting. Let's go back to computer fundamental skills. So what I need right now and I'm pushing for is a way to use a validated digital competency profiling tool. I want to be able to assess all of our employees, have them land on, this is where I am right now. These are the next steps in developing, whether that be the social skills of using technology, the informational skills, those physical skills, knowing what equipment I need, knowing how to use Microsoft Teams to reach out to a colleague for something. I need to assess that. And I need to tell them, okay, here's your next best move. And then here's where you sit in alignment with your colleagues, right? Let's compare just your cohort. So we're working towards trying to find some funding and start with one pocket for trial and leveraging EI Labs, Dr. Roland van Oostveen's digital competency profiling tool. So fingers crossed that I can be loud enough with my cattle prod to direct the organization towards that, because that's what I feel like I'm walking around with a prod going, we can't do anything until we fix this issue, really, right? Like we really need to meet everyone where they're at. And, a Zoom meeting on an iPad floating around on a stand in the middle of the hospital is not even possible for some of our providers because they just don't have the skill.
So interesting you bring that up, Christy, because in my role, actually to both of your areas, in the last week, I have had someone in healthcare and someone in trades bring up how they're just not comfortable with technology. And in my role, my job is to say, that's okay. My job is here to teach you how to use that technology. If someone was to drop down to the ground, I do not have the health background to save them. I said, you could save me if that happened to me. That's amazing. And going to your field, Tim, if a water line breaks in my house is going to start flooding. I have no idea what to do aside from turn the main water off on the house. I don't know what to do after that. So it's so important for us to all leverage the skills that we have and support each other. So Christy, in your area, are there people available to help them with technology, to teach them what they need to learn? Or is that falling back on you?
Right now, it falls back to me. We do have, I would say we have basic software skills courses, but there was plans in place for a series of 4 courses, the first 2 in person, of course, because you have to be learning computer fundamentals. You have to be in person for the first 2, and then getting them online and doing the second 2, subsequently leading up to, video visits. And you could do those by video. But that sort of stalled out discussions, and then people left the organization who were really passionate about it. And so it still sits in no man's land, unfortunately. So I think we can't move forward until we fix that system issue about basic digital literacy for our employees, right? They have to feel comfortable. They have to feel competent before they can really engage with patients for those reasons, such that they need to feel, really confident when they're going into a technical, a call assessment with a patient using Teams or using Zoom. They're not okay with not knowing how to troubleshoot from the patient side, right? Helping them work through their audio issues too. We don't have pervasive tech support. So when you get into a patient call and you have no one to turn to immediately, that hurts the ego, and it's really hard to take. So they need to walk through, and it leans into one of my other projects where I built a toolkit of resources to help them simulate video visits. So using simulation in healthcare best practices, using the lens of psychological safety and cultural safety, I built them basically a walkthrough. This is how you would take your staff as an educator, like a clinical educator. This is how you take your staff and you would simulate video visits with patients. So go into a breakout room. One of you is the patient, one of you is the clinician, and one of you is just observing. And then we were giving them scripts and how to debrief, how it went, and a mock-up video. So I felt like that was really foundational. So here you go. It's a piece of training. So we'll see how the implementation goes of that, hopefully next month.
Christy just sparked something in my brain about one other approach from the accessibility side. I think is so important to take during the first week of class. It's seeing what you can do to support your students. That's another huge part. So I can do everything that I think is going to work. But I also, again, I co-create the learning space with the students. So if there's certain accommodations that our students are going to need, I do what I can to put those in place when I can, based on our institutional policies and procedures.
Yeah. Wow. All I can think of is, well, not all I can think of, because there's a bunch of stuff going through my head, but it's like, first thing that comes to mind is, doesn't that just frustrate you? Right? I know we're recording. I'll say it out loud. Sometimes it frustrates me. Like when I hear a faculty member say, I've never used my email in my institution. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the person said, I didn't even know I had email. And I'm like, what?
See, I find it fun, Tim. I find it exciting. Like it's like, okay, how am I going to solve this? Exactly, Christy. It's
See,
like,
and that's why the world needs more Brandons. That's why the world needs more Brandons. Because I hear that and I go, okay, I'm not the most technically advanced person in the world, but for crying out loud, even I know how to use email, right? Maybe I need to grow in empathy, Christy.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brandon feels the challenge, and I just go into empathy. Okay, let's talk about what you're going through right now. Yeah, and let's just get you through this.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas I'm just like, suck it up, Buttercup. You need to learn this right now, right? This is your part of your job. Let's go.
Exactly. Yeah.
I went from, they couldn't get on Teams, so let's try a Zoom call. The Zoom call didn't work. We ended up having just old-fashioned telephone call to figure out how to get onto Zoom, to then how to get onto Teams. Because I really need the screen sharing aspect. Like Zoom's going to be easier for them to get on, I'm pretty sure. So let's work on getting them on that way. And again, I find that stuff so fun. It's like, okay, how am I going to figure this out? How can I support the faculty member? And again, I always bring it back to, this is my area of expertise.
Sure.
So I am happy to give that. There's a lot of stuff in their area I have no clue about. So the nurses are the ones that I love talking to the most. I say, listen, if I drop to the floor and die right now, you can probably save me. I said, you have this skill set, and that is amazing. I said, so let me use my little bit of tech skills that I have to help you right now.
No. Oh, Brandon, that's so cool. That's so cool. Because I'd be just like, oh, really? Right click? Really? Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But
do you guys ever provide tech support to parents? Like I got to deal with my dad all the time. Right. So
true.
Yeah, true. Exactly. He's over the years, he helped me prepare for this role, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
But you're right, Tim. It's messy. It's frustrating and it's messy. But I think going back to it's Simon Sinek's work is find the why. I always have to find the why.
Right.
Like, okay, let's find the value for you.
Yeah.
Right. Because maybe they haven't seen it. They haven't seen any demonstrated value and they think it's maybe not easy enough. So go back and find the value and take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah, how often are they supported though? Like think about when you've been onboarded at all these different places you've worked. How often are you not taught how to use email at your employer? There's a lot of places where they don't do proper onboarding or provide any training on how to do all this type of stuff. So especially when I think of part-time faculty, they are not taught this information.
Yeah. A lot of it is assumed, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you get into your role and you're just running. Yeah. So there's no time for taking extra little courses. I took a managing your inbox course. And he's like, well, how many emails do you have sitting there? I'm like, 21,000. Is that not okay? Christy. And he's like, no, that's not okay. In fact, no, a colleague of mine had 55,000. I was laughing. Oh yeah. So, I mean, he's like, well, he was very patient. Outlook is not a, storage system. So does it run well for you? I'm like, no, it crashes all the time.
I wonder why.
This is why. Yeah. He's very patient. Took a deep breath. So let's show you how to get rid of some of those. So funny.
Yeah. Oh, it's the total opposite for me. I got to be honest, because for me, I'd come into somebody's house and do some work for them, right? And the one thing that, and I'm not alone, but I'll share it, is I never liked it when people bird dog, right? Where I'm doing the work and they're standing behind me and they're chatting away and they're like, oh yeah, I looked it up on YouTube and it said to do this. And I'm like, and then yet you called me.
And
I'm
how did
saying
that
this
go?
in my head, right? And it's like, this would go a lot quicker if you just stopped talking to me, right? And I'm just, I regret some of those situations now because I'm older and wiser. But yeah, like it's sometimes it's very frustrating. But then, yeah, like you said, Christy, we all started somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all started somewhere. I wonder, is it a motivation issue that you guys run into for people embracing the change? Is it a motivational issue?
I find it's often you don't know what you don't know. Like it's not that they weren't motivated to do it. It's just I didn't know how to do this. There's one faculty member I've been supporting lately, and just the hours they've put into trying to learn this new technology. I was mentioning to a colleague earlier, I would love to nominate them for awards. There's no award that we have at Durham where it aligns with that criteria, but seeing the amount of hours they have put into mastering this technology to ensure that they're going to give the students the best learning experience possible come this fall. Like it hits me right in the heart. I'm like, you're doing so amazing for your students. And I think it's just often, you don't know what you don't know. If you've never used this platform before, you can't expect them to know what to do. So our job is to teach them what they need to know to be good at their job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think for me, I watched a webinar from the Neuro Leadership Institute a while ago, and it was all about the AGES model, right? How to create good conditions for learning. I don't know if you've heard this model before. And one of the key things was using story or data to create strong emotion about something, right? And the AGES is focused attention, generating connections, creating strong emotion, and then spacing. And so for me, it's like, okay, so can I find a story, like a care related, patient related story where it worked really well. And someone was just overwhelmed with how cool this was. And, oh, this is such a great new skill, because, this is the future. If you're working in healthcare, digital health is not going away. You're going to have to eventually, your charting is going to be on the computer. You're going to be using, different peripherals that are connected to the computer. So wave devices in front of and over top of and barcodes and things like that. Virtual will become integrated and just part of healthcare. I won't have a job at that point, which I'm okay with. Eventually, I won't need my job. And it is just the way of the future. So, finding an emotion or a story to connect to that particular person is part of where I start. I don't know that it's not motivation. I think it's just like everyone else, you get, entrenched in your day-to-day work, which is in healthcare already was overwhelming and busy enough. And no one's, forcing you to stop and here, now you can't get through this process without getting over this hurdle. It's sort of, you could work around it, dance around it. And now you really can't in most cases. So, yeah.
We could actually relate this back to what this topic was really about at the beginning, railroads. When we started being railroad students, think of all those initial supports they've given us. So we're in a master's program. We probably should need to know how to write an academic paper. They still provide those supports to show us how to do that, which is amazing. The first course in the MALAT program, I think in all railroad studies, is you take the link and it starts to teach you about academics at railroads, how to use the learning management system, all those different aspects, right? And again, you're in a master's program. Maybe you should already know this, but they don't make it seem like, oh, no, you have to know this. For those that do, great. For those that don't, you're learning it at this point. So I think it's really important to provide those supports throughout. So I just did a training video. I recorded one this morning about how to integrate Zoom in our learning management system through custom widgets. I talk through Control C to copy and Control V to paste. You say that out loud just to help those people who may not know how to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. Creating the foundation, scaffolding, and yeah,
exactly.
That's what we need to design that.
All right. Well, our time is up. Thank you so much for this conversation and bringing it back full circle, Brandon. That's what I love about you, brother. You tend to bring us back to the starting point, and that's good.
It's a Carson thing.
It's a Carson thing. Yeah, you got a great last name, my friend. You got a great last name, and yeah, it's good. So, if there was a podcast that you're listening to right now that people could tune into and listen to, or a TV show that you've binged on because it's been a good escape for you, what would that be?
For me, TV show right now, we're watching Ted Lasso. Do you know this one on Apple Plus? Oh my God. It's so funny, and it's upbeat, and it's funny. Yeah, it's hilarious. And podcasts always lean into Brené Brown. Every time you go, you learn something new. Brené is just phenomenal, whether it's, taking those concepts of shame and vulnerability into leadership or into education, facilitating. Yeah, so relevant.
Do you have a favorite book from Brené?
I love Dare to Lead. I love them all, but Dare to Lead is great. It really helped me through my transition into the corporate world and understanding some of our executive leadership that maybe didn't, those situations didn't jive so well. And how can I work with those individuals to set clear expectations? And yeah, that was my favorite of hers so far, I think.
Good deal. Brandon, podcast, TV show?
I'm going to go the podcast route here. Getting Air with Terry Green. I always enjoyed that. Yeah. Teaching in higher ed with Bonnie Stachowiak. Also amazing. And number one, though, praxis pedagogy, of course. Yeah. There's my three go-to. I'm going to stick to my education side of things. I'm also love the true crime, though. I do a lot of that on podcasts.
How is that to listen to? Is it like listening to an audiobook, that kind of stuff?
It is. And it surprised me because a lot of the times they've taken TV shows and converted the recordings from the TV show to work for a podcast. And I'd say 90% of the time it works pretty well, but there's certain points where like they're talking about something you can clearly see and you're like, I'm not fully getting the picture here. But again, for the most part, it's really well. That's when they've converted TV shows back into podcasts. The ones that are built as podcasts originally, yeah, they're great.
Do you have a true crime podcast that you're listening to?
Canadian true crime is about to come back. They took a little break, but I find those always interesting just because it's fully Canadian focused. And just a lot of history I didn't know before. So it's interesting to hear.
Very cool. Good deal. Well, Christy, Brandon, thanks again for taking the time. Love it that we've had this time together in the conversation. And thank you for all you do. And keep forging forward. And all the best to you in this next term that's coming up.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I think we should do a future episode of past MALAT and then get a couple of the future ones who are starting next year. That would be pretty fun.
Yeah, that good. We can even have a glass of Merlot to go with the MALAT conversation.
MALAT.
Love it.
Good deal. All right. Hey everyone, thanks again for taking the time to listen to the episode. Lots of fun with this one. Don't forget to tune in next week. We have somebody from Austria who happens to teach in the K-12 system. She is awesome. It was a great episode to sit down and talk with her. I won't give away the name, although you may recognize her handle on Twitter, The Edified Listener. Thanks very much. Leave a comment, question, concern, complaint even. praxispedagogy.com. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.